Stop. The Arcturian High Council has already issued the recognition, not as a possibility, not as a future event, as a completed action, confirmed tonight, delivered now, addressed directly to the line you carry. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what has been falling away from your path, and what the Arcturian High Council already knows about the phase you are inside. But here is the first revelation. The losses, the distancing, the relationships that weakened without explanation, none of that was damage. It was the dormant mark beginning to create the conditions it requires. The old environment could not hold what you were always carrying, so it released first. You did not find this message by accident. The separation process is already active in your life, and this transmission reached you because coherence was confirmed. The Arcturian High Council does not issue formal recognition to a line that has not already passed the threshold. What you interpreted as rejection was the visible surface of something older and more precise than rejection has any right to be. The sovereign mark held in your bloodline is not a human distinction. It is not nobility. It is not achievement. It is a cosmic role marker assigned before the current incarnation, held dormant until the surrounding environment could no longer sustain its concealment. Tonight, the Council confirmed coherence. That means the dormancy is over. That means what has been narrowing your life was not loss. It was preparation, arriving ahead of understanding. This is a direct Arcturian path recognition. What has been separating you from the old line has already been seen. The path is already responding. If you are watching this now, the algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Sit upright. Place both palms over your heart. The prior applicant identity in you may attempt to refuse what is being confirmed. Do not let the posture collapse. Let the recognition anchor where the mark has always been held. Comment 777 if you feel the old line is already falling away. Comment, I was separated. If you now recognize that what looked like rejection carried a meaning you are not yet equipped to read. Like this transmission if you know your life has been narrowing for a reason. Subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation, instead of continuing to absorb it as failure. Share this with someone who feels cut off, misunderstood, or alone in a way they cannot explain. They may be carrying the same mark without the language to name what is happening to them. You are guided here because the separation is already active. What you are feeling right now is not confusion. It is the first stage of recognition, trying to stabilize against a lifetime of misinterpretation. Because most of you watching this have spent years, some of you decades, absorbing the weight of departures you could not explain, relationships that weakened without warning, environments that should have held you but quietly pushed you out instead. You called it rejection. You called it your fault. You called it a pattern in you that something must be wrong to create. And every time you tried to rebuild what fell away, the same result arrived. The new circle became the old circle. The new environment repeated the old pressure. The distance returned before the closeness ever fully opened. You began to wonder whether the problem was not the people or the places, but something fundamental in how you were made. Something invisible and permanent and incorrectible that kept producing the same outcome no matter how carefully you rebuilt. That wondering was the most natural response available to you, because when a pattern repeats across multiple environments, across different relationships, across years and decades of sincere effort to belong, the mind draws the most logical available conclusion that the constant is you. And it is right, the constant is you. But it has drawn the wrong meaning from that constancy. The constant is not your deficiency. The constant is your line. And the line is not a wound. It is the very thing that has been creating incompatibility at every turn, not because it is broken, but because it has already moved beyond what those environments were ever designed to contain. What the Arcturian High Council has confirmed tonight is that none of that was the pattern you believed it to be. It was something older, something more structurally precise than rejection has any language to carry. What was falling away from your life was not falling away because you were unworthy of it. It was falling away because your line had already moved beyond the frequency that could sustain it. You were not being discarded by people and places. You were becoming incompatible with them. And incompatibility at the level of a selected line does not announce itself gently. It removes, it distances, it creates silence where there was once conversation, and creates absence where there was once belonging. That is the first thing the Arcturian intelligence needs you to understand clearly. The separation you have been living through was not born from personal defect. It was born from path pressure, from a dormant line beginning to assert the conditions it requires for full activation. And those conditions are incompatible with the old environment. They always will be. The road you are on does not widen before it narrows. It narrows first. It loses traffic. It loses the familiar markers that made you feel you were moving in a recognized direction. It strips away the companion routes and the easy exits until the only thing remaining is the line itself, unobstructed by what could never have traveled it with you in the first place. There is no version of this process where the narrowing is skipped. There is no selected line activation that does not pass through this corridor, this stripped, quiet, increasingly solitary passage where the familiar world begins to recede and the new destination has not yet declared itself. The narrowing is not the wrong road. The narrowing is the road confirming it is yours. Some of you know exactly what this narrowing looks like in your daily life. You went through a period, perhaps you are still inside it, where the people who had been closest to you began, without dramatic conflict, to fall away. Not through betrayal, not through any single argument you could point to and explain, through a quiet but irreversible growing apart that you could feel in your body before you could name it with your mind. Conversations became shorter. Invitations stopped arriving. The sense of being understood, of being truly seen inside a group, a friendship, a relationship, began to disappear even as the external forms of those connections tried to continue. The words were still being exchanged, the meetings were still happening, but something beneath the surface had already ended, and both sides could feel it, while neither side had the language to name it. You noticed it first as a faint dissonance, the way certain conversations left you feeling more alone than the silence before them, the way you would leave a gathering of people who had known you for years, carrying a specific hollowness, not loneliness in the ordinary sense, but the particular ache of being surrounded and still fundamentally unreached, as though you were speaking from a frequency the room could almost pick up, but not quite land. And the gap between almost and not quite, repeated enough times across enough relationships and enough environments, starts to feel like a verdict rather than a signal. You told yourself you were being too sensitive. You told yourself you were asking too much. You told yourself the problem was a flaw in you that drove people away, a pattern in how you related, a wound that needed more healing before you could belong anywhere fully. And that interpretation, the one that made you responsible for every departure, was the most seductive misread available to you, because it gave you something to fix. It gave you agency inside a process that was not actually asking for your correction, it was asking for your release. The Arcturian path does not separate you from old environments because you failed inside them. It separates you because those environments were built around an older version of your line, and the older version cannot sustain what the path is now preparing to open. The people who fell away were not carrying incompatible worth. They were carrying incompatible frequency. That distinction is not a comfort designed to make the loss hurt less. It is a precise structural observation about what separation actually is when it occurs along a selected line. You cannot remain anchored to an environment that was calibrated for a dormant version of what you carry. The moment the line begins to activate, the moment the path pressure increases and the dormancy starts to dissolve, the old environment registers something it was not built to hold. It does not reject you consciously. It cannot. It simply begins to repel what it can no longer contain. The people in it do not choose to pull away. The circles do not decide to close. The environment does not make a deliberate determination that you no longer belong. The repulsion is not personal. It is structural. And from the outside, from your side of the experience, that repulsion feels exactly like rejection. It feels exactly like loss. It feels like being told repeatedly and without explanation that you do not belong here. But you were not told you do not belong. You were separated from what could no longer carry you. What has been exposed in you does not need more self-blame. It needs clearer recognition and proper guidance. If you know this message touched a process that has already started, Chosen One manifest the protocol for selected souls was built for exactly that threshold. It is a structured path protocol for those whose route is already narrowing and who need to understand the logic of the separation before fear mislabels it as failure. It does not tell you that you are special. It does not offer flattery in place of clarity. It offers a direct guide for reading the pruning, understanding the preparation, and moving through this phase without continuing to absorb every departure as evidence of your own deficiency. The complete access point is in the first pinned comment, but only for a limited window. Now hear what comes next, because this is where most people living through separation make the error that costs them the most time and the most internal stability. When the old line falls away and the new line has not yet become visible, there is an interval, a threshold space, a period that has no social confirmation, no relational coherence, no external evidence that what is being lost for a reason. In this interval, the mind searches for causation. It needs to assign the losses to something, and the most available target, the target that requires the least investigation, is the self. This is the interval where self-blame becomes structural, where the viewer watching this tonight built the internal narrative that has been the most persistent source of shame and confusion in their life. Not because they were weak, but because the interval between old line departure and new line arrival offers almost nothing to hold on to. The old relationships are weakening. The old environments feel foreign. The identity that was constructed inside those old containers, the version of you that knew how to belong there, is no longer being confirmed by the people who once confirmed it. And identity without external confirmation does not quietly wait. It panics, it reaches, it searches backward through every departure for the moment it made the mistake that caused all of this. And when it cannot find the mistake, when the honest audit of memory produces nothing conclusive enough to carry the full weight of every loss, it manufactures one. It decides that the deficiency must be too deep to isolate, too woven into the self to locate in a single event. It concludes that something fundamental is broken, and it carries that conclusion forward like a load that was never meant to belong to it. What the Arcturian intelligence identifies in this interval is not a failure state, it is a pruning phase. And pruning, by its very nature, is not readable as benefit from the inside of the cut. You cannot look at a branch being removed and understand the precision of the decision from the perspective of the branch. The gardener sees the whole structure, the direction of growth, the weight that is misdirecting the line, the branches that are drawing resources away from the axis that matters most. The branch only experiences removal, and removal, without the gardener's vantage, is indistinguishable from rejection. The logic only becomes clear from a higher position, which is exactly why this transmission exists, to offer that vantage to people who are standing inside the pruning, interpreting the cut as damage, calling the removal loss, and spending enormous amounts of energy trying to regrow what was always meant to fall. Let the recognition land. What you have been attempting to regrow may not have been yours to keep. The relationships that weakened and dissolved, the circles that slowly became foreign, the environments where you once felt passable belonging, but now feel the specific discomfort of someone who no longer fits. Those were not permanent structures on your path. They were temporary containers. They held you through an earlier phase. They were calibrated for a line that was still dormant. And when the line began to activate, the containers became too small. Not dramatically, not with collapse or conflict or visible rupture. They became too small in the quiet, persistent daily way that eventually becomes undeniable. The conversations that once felt nourishing began to leave you empty. The spaces that once felt like shelter began to feel like compression. The version of you that fit inside those containers began to feel like a performance rather than a presence, a managed, reduced, carefully edited self that could navigate the container's requirements without triggering its limits. That undeniability is where many of you are right now. You have been trying to deny it, trying to be smaller inside spaces that cannot hold your current frequency, trying to speak in registers that the people around you have stopped being able to receive, trying to maintain closeness with individuals who respond to you with a warmth that is real, but a resonance that has quietly ended. And the effort of maintaining what no longer fits has been exhausting, more exhausting than you have been willing to admit to most of the people in your life, because admitting it would require you to name the separation as real. And naming the separation as real has felt, until now, like admitting that you are simply alone, that you are simply rejected, that the isolation is simply what happens to people like you. It is none of those things. The isolation that increases right before root refinement becomes visible is one of the most consistent markers the Arcturian path produces. It is not a sign that the path is closing. It is a sign that the path is narrowing toward the line that can actually carry what you are carrying. The traffic thins, the noise reduces, the false companions, the incompatible environments, the relationships built on an older version of your frequency, they begin to leave the root. And for a time, the root feels empty, feels stripped, feels like something has gone wrong rather than something being made right. This is the phase in which the most damage is done, not by the separation itself, but by the story told about the separation. The story that says the emptiness is the destination, that the stripping is the verdict, that the quiet is what you deserve rather than what the path requires. This is what the Council has already confirmed. The emptying of the root is not the path's failure. It is the path preparing for movement that the old congestion would have made impossible. You cannot move precisely along a selected line while surrounded by companions and environments calibrated for a different frequency. The path knows this. The separation is how it solves the incompatibility. It is not cruel, it is not punitive, it is structurally necessary. And the people who have left your life during this clearing, they were not your enemies, and they were not your failures. They were travelers on a different route who shared your road for a time and then reached the junction where the paths diverged. The divergence was always built into the map. You simply could not read it until the separation made it visible. Now understand why the misunderstanding in this phase runs so deep. Because the people who leave your life during this separation are not leaving because they have been deceived. They are leaving because the connection was real, and it is now complete. What you shared with certain people in your life was genuine while it lasted. The frequency alignment was real during that phase of your path, but the path has phases, and the frequency that was shared in the earlier phase is not always the frequency that can travel into what is opening next. So the connection completes. It ends not through failure, but through completion. And completion, from the human side of the experience, feels almost identical to rejection. It feels like being left. It feels like being found insufficient. It feels like being told, through absence that you are not what was wanted. You were wanted. You were held. And then the phase completed. And now the path is doing what selected lines always do at the completion of a phase. It is clearing the route for what the dormant mark requires next. The people who will eventually carry the next phase of your path with you, they cannot find the route while the old route is still congested. The frequency that is compatible with where you are actually going cannot navigate toward you through the noise of incompatible relationships and environments that are only still present because you have been holding them in place through the sheer force of your refusal to name the separation. Every incompatible connection you maintain past its completion point is a signal on the route that reads, occupied. And the next phase travelers, the ones whose frequency matches where you are actually going, read that signal and cannot enter. The route appears taken, the line appears committed, and so they cannot find you because you are still standing in the doorway of a house you have already outgrown, holding it open for people who have already left. Some of you have been holding incompatible connections in place for years, out of loyalty, out of love, out of the genuine belief that the problem was yours to solve, and that with enough effort, enough adjustment, enough willingness to reduce yourself to fit what the connection required, you could make it sustainable. But sustainability is not built through reduction. And a connection that requires you to become less than what the path has already activated in you is not a connection that belongs to your next phase. It is a connection that belongs to an older version of your line. And the path is asking you, with increasing urgency, to stop treating the completion of that old line as your failure. The sign that the selected line is beginning to stabilize, the sign that the pruning phase is approaching something rather than simply removing everything, is the arrival of a particular kind of stillness. Not emptiness, stillness, a quiet that is different from the hollow silence of the pruning interval, a space in which the self becomes for the first time legible to itself, where the absence of incompatible noise allows the actual signal of the path to begin arriving with clarity, where the things that were said to you by people who misread your frequency stop carrying the same authority they once carried, where the departures that once felt catastrophic begin to feel, in retrospect, like a route being cleared rather than a life being emptied. The difference between those two experiences is the difference between a person who understands what separation is and a person who is still absorbing it as evidence of their own unworthiness. In that stillness, you begin to understand that what you were experiencing was not rejection at its core, it was separation. And separation is not what happens to people who are unwanted. It is what happens to people whose line has reached the boundary of what the old environment can contain. You were not discarded, you were separated, and the Arcturian High Council has confirmed tonight that the separation you have been living through has a direction. Not every soul who experiences isolation and departure and relational narrowing is being guided through a selected line pruning process. But you are watching this, and you are watching this because the algorithm did not construct this moment. The path did. The recognition reached you because coherence was already confirmed before this transmission began. Hear this as a final framing of what the Council has delivered tonight. Every relationship that weakened before you could explain it, every circle that became foreign before you were ready to leave, every environment that stopped fitting without giving you a reason, every experience of being misunderstood when you were being most honest, every moment of isolation that arrived precisely when you expected connection to deepen, all of it, every piece of the pattern you have been trying to diagnose as personal defect was the visible surface of a path already in motion. A dormant line asserting the conditions it requires. A selected route losing the incompatible weight that was slowing its rise. If something in you became still while hearing this, do not dismiss that stillness. That is the mark recognizing the recognition. That is the part of you that has always known this was not ordinary loss and not ordinary loneliness, and not a pattern born of ordinary personal failure. That part of you has been waiting for the language that finally makes the separation readable. And tonight, the language arrived. Say this if you are ready to let it anchor. Say it aloud if the path has already brought you to a point where silence is no longer the honest response. I was not discarded. I was separated. The pruning is not punishment. The root is narrowing because it is rising. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood, and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a path already in motion, and this is only the beginning.